So today I'll be talking about the power of having a speak up culture, having environments where employees' voice is welcome, and it's really good for business.
Wow.
What? Okay, red light means we're on. And we're live. We're live. We're live. We're here.
We're here. We're live.
Live from our basements. Hello, LinkedIn universe. So good to have so many of you here. Hello, everyone. Steven Shadletsky here. Delighted to be with you again. Same story. Steven Shadletsky with you. Delighted to be with you again. And now with my friend Jen Marr. Hello, Jen.
Hi, Shed. So good to be here.
You too. A quick shout out to Ashley and the team at Arcbound, because if it weren't for them, we wouldn't be here. Ashley
Absolutely.
Bitterman helped set us up here, so love it. And Jen, you and I met probably, I would say, more than 6 months ago, less than a year ago. Is that accurate?
I think that was about it.
Yeah.
It was right around the time the book came out, I think.
Yes.
Or it was about to.
And God bless the LinkedIn algorithm, because I think it's the LinkedIn algorithm that brought us together. And it turns out we had many mutual connections. And you told me about sort of your story and the impetus for your work, which we'll get into. But I'm so pumped to join you today and talk about showing up to care, showing up to connect, how speaking up and a speak up culture plays into that as well. I know so much of your background and history is in mental health work, but you're so passionate about bringing it into organizations, the workplace, society at large. So we're going to go there. As we do, and before we just hear from Jen, please feel free to hop into the comments, say hello, let us know where in the world you're joining us from. For anyone who's been on one of these lives with me before, you know that we love to hear from you. Please make any comments you have, ask any questions you have of Jen and myself as we go through this. But Jen, tell us about what's going on. How are you? And we'll hop into the combo.
Well, hi, Shed. So excited to be here. And what's going on in my life, actually, outside of work, is we are just selling our house in Washington, D.C. and moving to Wisconsin. And I have to do it in a matter of 2 weeks. So there's a little chaos in our house right now as we shed a lot of our furniture.
I see what you did there. I see what you did.
See it?
Yeah. Nice. Well, so this is the fruits of your labor. Showing up. It is an absolutely, I was just saying before we came on, it's an absolutely beautifully done. You said, the book is, you said it better than I will, so I'll let you say it in better words, but the book is designed to provide care and comfort, and so you designed it such that people feel cared for and comforted as they go through it, which is just like a design with intent. I love it. But tell us a bit more about the book, the journey, the work you're doing now, where it began. I know, so much of the impetus of this work for you has been hardship and tragedy, whether secondhand or firsthand. You're one of those few first responders or second responders who run toward pain, whereas I think so many of us run away from it. So that's sort of the foundation I'll set here, and amazing to see everyone joining us in the chat. We will say hello to you very shortly. But Jen,
Hi.
lay some foundation for us in this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, if you're going to talk about the book, we have to do a shout out to Sky Quinn. Sky, if you're here, from Time Magazine, who actually designed the book. Sky is a master at designing for mental health, right? You have to be able to design for all types of learning types. And especially in today's world, being able to grab little nuggets for short attention spans, good colors, good pictures. So that was the intent of the book, like you said.
Beautiful.
But going back, where did it start? So, my background was always in business development. That's what I did until I took a career break. I lived overseas. And international business development was my thing. I took a career break for my girls and ended up being really close to where the Sandy Hook tragedy happened. and in a very roundabout way ended up being on the front lines of coming in the recovery efforts and really offering care and support to everybody within the school, including teachers and students and staff and faculty. And while this was happening, I was training for the Boston Marathon. I was running it for charity. I'm not that good of a runner. And ended up less than 4 months later, a half mile from the finish line when the bombs went off. And dealing with both of these tragedies in such a short amount of time, it took a while to process. But in the middle of it, I continued to go to Sandy Hook. I was there every week for 5 years. And being on the one hand there to support one massive tragedy, and then on the other one, kind of needing support myself, I found that I was standing in this gap. And this gap was, on the one hand, are people really suffering terribly. And on the other hand, are people that care. Like they do have deep empathy and compassion. But the feeling that these people that are struggling feel is that nobody sees them. And so basically, as we dove down into this gap, and it all goes down into the purpose of the book showing up, is this gap is made up of what I would call the gap between social connectedness or emotional wellness, emotional intelligence, and actually having the social intelligence and the social intelligence to reach these people. So, put it this way, we have, when we go to colleges, 80% of students, and this actually is not just colleges, it's everybody. 80% of people will say, I can see when someone struggles. People consider themselves quite empathetic. But you ask them the other way, where do you feel least cared for? 80%. I only sometimes, rarely, or never feel seen when I struggle. That's the gap. That's the gap.
And so there's, and just so I'm understanding, so there's, or the way I'm making sense of this, so you said there's this emotional connectedness or empathy, but then there's I'll use the word compassion. I think you use the word social. Did you say social connectedness?
Yeah, well, let's look at it this way.
You go from I have empathy to then I'm willing to act and meet you there. Is that?
Yeah. So consider there's 4 layers between you and wanting to help someone that needs support. All right. The first layer would be your emotions of care. And in that would be emotions of empathy, compassion, sympathy, right? You can also put apathy on that line. We have to deal with apathy, right? But for now, let's just deal with empathy, compassion, and sympathy. Those are both feelings, right? Those are both, I am feeling what I'm feeling and feeling that for you. And so it's inward looking, it's thinking, it's considering, it's perspective taking, right? It's nouns, it's not verbs. So what happens then is you have to also understand that as good as those emotions are, you can be the most empathetic person in the world. You have to account for the opposing emotions that are going to come up against it, right? And we all know that. I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do. Oh my gosh, I'm afraid of this. What if I do that? I think it's the wrong time. I don't think they want to know about it. Or, you know what? That's not my job. I don't have time. So it doesn't matter however good your good, caring emotions are, you're going to have opposing emotions that are going to stop you about 80% of the time. And that's what our data will play out. 75% of people do not feel confident to know what to say and do to help someone struggling. So what you need to do then on the third layer is to layer in skills. You need to layer in those actions. You need to layer in the verbs and that's where the social intelligence comes in. Those first 2 layers are emotional intelligence. I have to be able to have enough intelligence to know, all right, I'm feeling empathy, but now you know what? I'm feeling awkward. Or I'm deflecting. Or wait, I'm trying, that's all in your head. And you're all like, what are they thinking? What am I thinking? And it's really important stuff.
Yeah.
But you have to have the skills and the confidence to know what actions do I now take to reach the person needing care. Does that make sense?
Nice. Oh, totally. And here's some stuff I'll add, and let's see how I'm doing. And then I want to say hello to everyone who's joining us. There's social intelligence isn't about saying the right or perfect thing, because I think that's also a narrative of I don't know what the right thing to say is, or what if it isn't perfect, or what if it isn't received. It's like there's a beautiful little animated video from Brene Brown with RSA Animate, the difference between sympathy and empathy. Have you seen
Mhm.
this? It's so
Oh,
good.
absolutely,
So good.
absolutely.
And I think part of what you're talking about, Jen, is, let's say I see you struggling. We
Mhm.
hop on for, a chat because we're friends, and once a quarter we just hop on and say, "What's up?" and "How can I help you?" and vice versa. And you come and you're like, "I'm overwhelmed," or "I'm struggling," or "This has happened."
Right.
I could avoid it, or I could go, "Oh, like I don't know what the right thing to say is, but just know that I care."
Little things.
Right? Like just
Mhm.
that, and you're just like, "Ah, thank you, I feel seen," you know? Or it
Yeah.
or it paves the way for you to share more, or,
Mhm.
you know questions are the gateway to curiosity. So
Exactly. But what you just did there too is you did that flip. You recognized your awkwardness. You
mm,
recognized, right? So you were
yes,
dealing with the awkward zone right there. And we can dive into the awkward zone because that's
well,
the
I'm good
sweet
at that one. Yeah.
spot.
But we can both be awkward and care. Like,
Yeah.
I think they're very complementary. I think they have to be.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so we'll talk about the value of awkwardness. I also want to talk about you and I might have a differing view on. I think you've described care as a skill, and I'm really interested in that because I come from a different perspective where care is more inherent. Doesn't
Mhm.
mean we can't develop it, but I want to chat more about that. First off, though, we have lots of people joining us. Here is, without further ado, the person who helped make this happen, Ashley. You are one of our favorite people. Thank you for being here and for making this happen. We have so many people. We have greetings from Brazil. Alejandro behind the scenes, let us know who some of these LinkedIn users are, so that we know who's here. We have Deborah in the Apache Reservation in Arizona. Very cool. Anna Maria from Poland. Beautiful. Boston, Pennsylvania. This is fantastic. In Toronto, as well. I'm in Toronto. Hey, Andy. This is great. And William H. Johnson Jr., who just commented previously, is here. So this is amazing to see. Oh, here's a good comment here from Linda. Where did it go? Comments rolling in here. Linda says, "Afraid of saying the wrong thing, we say nothing." And I think even saying, "I'm afraid to say the wrong thing," so instead of saying nothing, I'm just going to say, "I care," or "I want to hear more," or "I notice you're struggling." I think is something here. Alejandro dropped that Brene Brown sympathy empathy link there. Thank you, Ale. That is awesome. What else are you seeing here, Jen, or want to call out before we dive into some more topics here?
You know what? The screen I'm looking at does not show me these, so
Oh,
I
okay.
I can't call
we will
anything
we
out.
will
But I
all
would like to
do it
thank
for you.
everybody who's here.
If, by the way, Jen, you're able to, on the far right, it says comments. If you click comments, you'll see the nice line of
Oh,
red.
thank you for
That
that.
might help.
Oh my gosh, there we go. Look
Yeah,
at
but
that.
William Johnson Jr., I don't know what is going through, but I'm here to stand and support you. Love that. Love that.
I love
Um,
this.
Beautiful. Light bulb, we can both be awkward and still care about each other. I think those two are inextricably linked.
No,
Um,
absolutely. And there's a lot to learn about awkward today.
awesome. And I've just been informed that one of the LinkedIn users is Stan from Brazil. Welcome, Stan. Good to see you again. So, okay, so we spoke about Sandy Hook. For those who aren't aware of Sandy Hook, that was unfortunately an elementary school shooting, December 2012, and
10
then
years this
and
December.
wow, and then a mere, what would it, 4 months later,
Mhm.
April 2013, was the Boston Marathon bombing, and you
Yep.
were in both of those communities at that time.
Yep.
Um, so what more can we and that's just some facts for everyone just to follow along about what we're talking about as well. We spoke about, Jen, awkwardness, and awkwardness is a skill. We can also talk about care as a skill, and then let's see what other comments and questions come in here through the chat as well.
Sure. No, absolutely. Why don't we talk about like just from that place, like where this came about, right? Um, because what I was noticing, having been in business development all my life, that's how your brain works, right? Like, what is not working here? Why is it? why is it that all these people care but nobody's reaching, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what were the programs
That's
on the
worth
ground?
repeating. Why is it that so many people care but so few reach out, or no one's reaching out?
Or know it, right?
Yeah.
And nobody can show it.
Mm.
And, so what was happening on the ground? Happening on the ground were very well-intentioned programs to help rebuild communities.
Mm-hmm.
Programs most schools have of random acts of kindness, right? But random is still random. They're beautiful things. But if you look at what happened in Sandy Hook, I'm sure it's now in Uvalde and wherever these terrible situations happen, is people just send stuff. And in the case of Sandy Hook, 67,000 teddy bears were sent to a town of 20,000 people. It was warehouses and warehouses and warehouses full of stuff, right?
Wow.
People with like hundreds of thousands of people really wanting to help, but ended up adding an extra burden. So it did not end up with connection,
And it
right?
wasn't for lack of intention,
It
but
wasn't for lack of
3.5
intention.
teddy bears per capita is not going to solve that issue.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and the other thing that was on the ground were a lot of conceptual programs, right? Emotion-based training, programs of empathy and programs of compassion. And again, please never misunderstand what I'm talking about. Emotions are incredibly important. Emotional intelligence, understanding our emotions is great,
Mm-hmm.
but it doesn't equip you. I will go so far as empathy in my mind is not a skill, it's an emotion. You need to have skills to apply that emotion. So when people say empathy is the number one leadership trait, I think that's what is continuing to go around in our heads, because how do I apply a noun? You can't be empathy by somebody. You can't be compassion by somebody. And so what would happen on the ground are people that they understand I need to care, but I don't know how to do it. And so it started there. Like we have to build these skills. And at the time I was going into Sandy Hook every week for 5 years, but I was also deploying to all these other, suicide, drug overdose, staff death, whatever it was. And those are 24, 36 hours and then you're out. And I kept thinking, it was like, teach a man to fish, he can fish for a day. And or teach a man to fish, he'll eat for a lifetime, right?
Yeah.
That's what I started thinking about. If we're just coming in to care for a short amount of time and then we leave, where's the resilience, right? And if we can teach each other how to care for each other, because I would watch as students had their phones in their hand and they had no idea what to do to each other. And so that is what started it. And so now we're a couple research studies and 2 books later. I work very closely with David DeSteno out of Northeastern University to really understand the science behind human care and the process behind it. And it, in fact, is a process you can learn. And within our studies, so to go back to your point, you can teach somebody with apathy to how to care for someone. You can require the steps, and that person will cultivate empathy every time. But you have to have the process for them to go through. You can tell a leader, you may not care about your employee that just lost their dad, but here are the 4 things you should do for that person, right? So you can teach them to show care. To your point, maybe you don't change their heart. But however, if you have them do those required actions and do them enough times, all of a sudden they're like, whoa, I get it now.
And they feel it. Cool.
Then they cultivate the emotion.
Oh,
So
very cool.
that goes back then to where you can have empathy on that chart. You can take someone with or and you can give them the actions to reach the person that needs care. And if they do that enough time, it comes up and cultivates the emotion.
Oh, beautiful. So this reminds me, so you're essentially saying, Jen, which I agree with, we can act our way to new thinking.
It's a great way to say it.
So this comes from a retired U.S. naval submarine nuclear powered sub captain, David Marr. So Marr wrote the book Turn the Ship Around, and when he took command of his first sub, it was 1998, 1999 was when he was to take command. And you were taught at the time, if you're a good captain, you'll have a good ship. But if you're a great captain, you'll have a great ship, meaning the responsibility was very much on the shoulders of the captain. And so you had 52 weeks to study to take command. And he was 50 weeks in studying to take command of the USS Olympia. And 2 weeks before he was to take command, his orders changed. And they went, never mind, you're now taking command of the USS Santa Fe. a newer ship and the worst rated ship across the entire fleet of the U.S. Navy. And so he spent 50 weeks studying for one, and it's like studying. It's like studying for an algebra test, and then like the day before, they're like, "Oh, sorry, physics," and you're like, related but very different. And so he learned and saw firsthand, because it was a different ship with different controls and different specs.
Wow.
And so he had this experience where he shouted a command, his second in command, his navigator, shouted the same order. The navigator knew, because he had been on the ship for 2 years, that the command didn't exist. He set a heads 2/3 on the throttle, and that setting wasn't on the ship. And so the engineer didn't do anything. And Marquet's like, "What's going on?" And the engineer, Seaman Jones, said, "There's no setting. There's no 2/3 setting on this ship." And so Marquet realized, we're all going to die if we lead the way that I've taught you, that I've been taught to lead. And so one of the things he wanted to do, and this is the actuator new thinking bit, he wanted to instill a sense of pride on board the USS Santa Fe. But I can't say to you, "Hey, Jen, please act as if you're proud." Like, it's really hard to do, but you can give people steps to follow. So anytime there was a guest on board the USS Santa Fe, and there's guests all the time, but one of the guests will be an evaluator and an auditor. And he wanted to bring that ranking higher, but you don't know. It's like a mystery shopper. You don't know when they're on. And so Marquet taught everyone, as soon as a guest is on board, you must, when you interact with them, stop, look them in the eye, put out your hand, shake their hand, say your name, say what you do on board, and say, "Welcome aboard the Santa Fe." And then at the end of the evaluation, the evaluator would say, "Wow, everyone's really proud to be here." And then Marquet would say, "Hey, everyone, look at the evaluation. You're all proud to be here." And they're like, "Yeah, I guess we are." So I'm all for a shift in mindset, but to circumvent a shift in mindset, especially for a leader, especially for a school administrator or a teacher, especially for a parent, I think part of what you're teaching here are the steps that you can do to make an emotional and social connection and form empathy and care. And you're just sort of hoping or betting that once people get a taste of it, they're like, "Oh, this is good, and I can do that again." So that's a little bit of a diatribe, but that's
what a great analogy, and there's a lot of truth to that, because look, it's how we're wired. When all of a sudden we do what's good, it feels right and we want to do it more.
Yep. We are neurologically programmed.
Absolutely. Yep. And so one of the things that we do also for that leader, he has to know the process and the steps, and he has to know, obviously we teach this in 4 steps. We assess and we inform, we equip and cultivate. So in the assess part, what we can do is we can assess different behaviors, right? We can assess how you react to care. And look, this is behavioral. This is not like a Myers-Briggs test, like you are wired to be a deflector, right? But basically what happens is,
no, I'm not.
You are not. No, you're not. You also speak up. You're not a deflector.
I'm just deflecting in that. Carry on.
Right. Yeah. So what we've learned over the last years that we've been doing this, and because we assess everyone we work with, is that in that awkward zone, in that gap, there's a couple barrier levels. We kind of broke it into 4 buckets, right? So the first, if you know someone's struggling and you failed to act, right? So, wow, I know Sally on my team lost her mom. I haven't reached out yet. There will be one of 2 buckets that you will fall under. And each of these have a lot of different behaviors. Either you're going to deflect that. Either that was a deflecting reaction. A deflecting reaction would be someone that says, not my place to step in. I got my own problems. I don't have time. Someone else can do that better. They
wouldn't want to hear from me anyway.
That's sheer deflection. Yeah. Or you have the doubter, which would be, I don't think they want to hear from me. I'm afraid I'm going to say the wrong thing. Okay. So if you haven't reached out to Sally yet, you'll be either deflecting or doubting. But let's say you run into Sally in the supermarket and you can't help. Now we run into the responding barriers.
Mm-hmm.
So you are either, if you are not adequately caring well for Sally, you will either have fallen into the avoider camp where you run into her in the supermarket, or maybe go even the next aisle
Mm-hmm.
and don't bring it up. I'm not bringing up her dad. I'm going to talk about work. I'm going to talk about the weather. So either you're avoiding that, or you're going to be a fixer and you're going to jump in. Well, when my dad died, and I went and saw this therapist that's really good, or maybe you should try this.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if we can normalize that, okay, so let's say every leader now knows, all right, am I deflecting? Am I doubting? Am I trying to be a fixer, or am I avoiding? If we can normalize that language, that
Mm,
is part of the biggest step. That's the language of the gap, right?
mm,
That's the language of all those people that see people struggle but don't know what to do. It starts with understanding what's stopping me and
mm-hmm.
understanding the human behaviors behind that awkwardness. And so we can do that. And we can, so through that assessment, we'll do that. And it's a self assessment. You could change each week. We actually find after COVID that people that typically would be doubters
Mm-hmm.
are more deflectors because they're just stressed out. And I
Mm-hmm.
can't take that on. I can't deal with that right now. And then they'll notice it and they're like, oh my gosh, like I'm deflecting that. I really shouldn't. And and so then it makes them think different, because we know that human connectedness is what makes us thrive. And so we know it's right. And so it helps to prompt us have language to really look into that to change our behaviors.
Nice. So one is, if you notice you're not showing up to care and connect, it's really an examination of why not and what's the behavior I'm exhibiting. So you said deflect, doubt, avoid, fix.
Mhm.
I'm envisioning, buy that Betty Crocker cake. That'll make your grief go away. That's part of fix as well, for perhaps. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
so then what's so and then you also mentioned the assess, inform, equip, cultivate. So I mean, I'm sort of envisioning, Jen, I'm going through the decision tree of, people who have the skills, are willing to know how to embrace the awkward and exhibit some care and connection for those who need
Mhm.
it or want it. Great. And then there's sort of the other part of the decision tree where people are deflecting, doubting, avoiding, fixing. So once you do that sort of self-assessment, and I'm assuming we all have these behaviors within us, like I can't say, oh, I'm a deflector all the time. Sometimes it could be fixing. It's contextual, I'm assuming. Um, so then once I do that self-examination of what is getting in the way of me showing up to care and connect,
Mhm.
what's next?
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think, that last thing that you just said is the most important thing of all, because look, this is a lifestyle, right?
Mm,
This is no different than eating well or exercising, right? This is a way of life that we should all be doing. This is not what I do, it's who I am, right? Who
oh,
am I?
nice.
Am I being a genuinely caring person for the people around me? Is that who I am? Do I want to leave a legacy that people always say, you know what, she always was there for me, she always showed up? Or am I too focused on what I'm doing? So I think, when we think of it that way, we know that I will fall into those four buckets all the time still.
Yeah.
We all do, because it's human nature. When we have too much cortisol in our system, which we all do right now from stress,
Hmm.
um, we react different. And in fact, when you have too much cortisol, you will actually want to self isolate. You want to back out of relationships. It's a pull
Yeah.
sometimes to remember, like, this is what I need to do. Um, to be the best person. And so it's a skill. It's why I wrote the book, right? Like it's something you need to refer to all the time, because it's just like if you go on a diet, you're going to get off track, you're going to eat wrong for a while. And
Yeah.
you know what? I'm going to do the wrong thing about caring for someone, all the time, but at least I'm going to try and I'm going to get
Yeah.
better at it. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And it's like the number of times, at the end of the day when, if I or when I feel in the dumps or drained, and the very last thing that I want to do is connect with another person, like I'll go for a walk, or
Right.
I'll be like, "Ugh, I'm gonna make a call." And I phone a friend, or I phone that person that I'm avoiding, but I know I should, who I love, and like I'm restored, and I come out the other end like, and
Right.
that's our neurology. Like that's more oxytocin, more serotonin, more dopamine, more endorphins if I'm walking,
You got it.
eating dark chocolate, like all of these things. So though sometimes it's our instinct to turtle, I
Mhm.
think it's just cortisol getting in the way,
Yeah.
or our stress or self-talk or
No, it's true. It's that's the science. You know, it's an actual really cool thing about the science. The number one TED Talk, I'm not sure if you saw this, number 19 TED Talk, I'm sorry, is Dr. Kelly McGonigal from Stanford University, and her,
rings a bell.
right? And so she does this talk about how when we are under stress, our stress response is actually to find people to connect, right? So have you ever had that feeling where like I got to get this off my chest, like I'm holding something in. So we
Yeah,
have a lot of
never.
cortisol. We kind of stress response is to isolate, and I need to get this off my chest. She will tell you that that is your body releasing a little oxytocin into your
Mhm.
stress response to seek connection.
Yes.
And so, because we're relational beings, so part of us wants to isolate. You know, when we work with college students, it looks like this. The college students will say, I just get so stressed, I need to go into my room. And then I go into my room, I'm by myself, and I'm like, no, I need to be with people. Now I need to go with people. And then I'm like, no, I need to be by myself. It's this push pull between
Mhm.
knowing you need this connection, but yet being under stress and not knowing how to have that connection. We've kind of lost our way socially, especially over these last 3 years. So, it's in understanding that we can really start to make progress when we dive into our own behaviors.
Nice, nice. Please we have about 15, 20 minutes left. So if you have any comments or questions you are sitting on or grappling with for us in this conversation, especially for Jen, please do hop into the chat and prompt and ask. Would love to see those and feel those and enter those into the discussion. Um, Jen, I can share with you where this perspective of how it was hard for me to see that care is a skill. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I now see, and perhaps you can even walk us through what are those steps. And then I
Mm-hmm.
can tell you why I was struggling with that, and just because it might be fun. But can you? So let's say, um, I'm a senior leader. Someone on my team has suffered a hardship, lost a parent. Um,
Right.
I could, I know I should, but I enter into those deflect, doubt, avoid, fix. How, like, what are the steps that you would say, okay, here's what you do? Is
Well,
it
yeah.
going into that example of,
So there's two different things. There's the science behind it, and I could walk you through the science of when we did the research study of how you take a child that has only apathy and turn it around. It's you require the connections, and it's a combination of 4 steps of perspective taking. You become present, you become aware, you put yourself in the other person's shoes to understand what are they thinking, you select an action of care, right?
mm,
What am I going to say something? All right. Those are perspective taking, those are still very emotional thinking, right? The last 3 steps or 2 steps are all socially related. That is that required connection. So you have to cross that bridge. You have to decide, you have to have the skills. Now, when I see this person, what am I going to say? We teach people to not be the focus grabber, to keep the attention on them, to not give advice, like we use this pause filter and a lot of other little tricks. Um,
mm,
and to tell them how to, give this act of care to the person. And then we reflect back and understand how it helped us and to select the next care, an next action of care and do the circle again.
nice.
Because caring for someone is never one thing. It's a lot of little things. And I think that's something back to the executive, what we would tell the executive is we would have had him do an assessment and he would understand, do I tend to deflect or do I tend to avoid? Am I more a fixer or am I a avoider? It could be different on different days, but what are my natural tendencies?
Yeah.
And then we tell through that assessment too, it's what's your favorite way to communicate? Where are your listening skills, good and bad? What is your favorite way to do actions towards people? And so he would kind of have his roadmap and you would say, you need to reach out this person. First of all, validate and acknowledge, because by not validating and acknowledging, you're having that person feel more and more unseen and uncared for. And
Hmm.
we would also tell him it's not your job to fix it. It's nothing big you have to do. It's a lot of little things. It is make sure you're touching base with that employee at least once a week.
Mm,
What is that, a text? Is it popping them an email? Is it dropping off a Starbucks gift card? however you want to acknowledge it, that's what you need to do.
Yeah.
Because it's little things that will build up trust, right? You have to build up trust before anybody's going to want to really talk to you about it.
Yep.
But it's the actions to show that you acknowledge and validate what they're going through. And then ultimately you continue those actions, and then the trust develops. The person will come to you and just say, and ultimately maybe, hey, can I share something with you? And it's laying that groundwork. So the executive needs to know it's a lot of little things. It's nothing major. And it is your job to show up. It is your job to be there.
Yeah, and if you don't view it as your job, you might be in charge, but you're not behaving as a leader.
Mm-hmm.
Be aware.
Exactly.
So two things come to mind. One is a story with a client, and then a story with a someone who's become a quick new friend. Um, uh, So I'm a big fan. We all hear the golden rule, right? Do
Yeah.
to others as you would want done unto yourself. We teach that to everyone in kindergarten. Nice, but it lacks empathy. So a little fun example of this. So I did work with a large hotel chain. Their purpose, they articulated it as to care for people so as they can be at their best. And
Love
there's a
that.
story. Uh, uh, a hotel client takes a cross ocean flight, ends up not feeling very well, flu or whatever. They check into the hotel. The person who checks them in allows them to circumvent and like skip pretty well everything. Doesn't
Mm-hmm.
even ask for a credit card, like whatever. I'm making this up a little bit, but gets them into their room so quickly and sends them up a bowl of chicken soup. Now, is that care? And the response is no, because you have no idea if that person likes or wants chicken soup. Instead, you can say, when you are home and feel like this, what helps you? And they could say, sleep, or carrot soup, or this soundtrack, this music, a warm towel, whatever. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's care, because it's platinum rule, not golden rule, right? Platinum rule is treat others the way they wish to be treated, which requires relationship and
Mm-hmm.
understanding. So, a fun little story of this, I have a coaching client who was very early in his role, C-suite role. He had a chief of staff who was working very hard, and he wanted to acknowledge them. And he said, "I'm going to send them flowers." And I
Mm-hmm.
said, "Do you know if they like flowers?" And he said, "I don't know." I said, "Is there anyone you know who would know?" He went, "Yeah." I said, "Ask them." Like for all you know, her dad who just passed away last month ran a flower shop and that's going to trigger her. Or maybe
Right.
it's the perfect thought. I don't know.
I
Um,
love that.
but
But I
and
mean, back to the hotel example,
yes,
honestly, I think even if like hotel chain skipped the line, got them in a room right away,
that's
and
care.
delivered something, that is showing care. Not be perfect care, but it's better than making the person stand in line.
Yeah.
Um,
Or your credit
but I
card is
loved, I
fine.
love
Please
that.
provide another credit card and proof of I just want to go to bed. So yes, platinum rule. The other
Love that.
thing, the other thing, a new friend, Kara Harden, I just met with Kara on Monday, and I believe she's a trained psychotherapist, but I could be getting that wrong. But she has this question. She asks when we finally sat down, we were having coffee, and she says, "How are you really doing?"
Yeah, I love
I'm like,
that.
"Oh, that's so good." Because I usually go, "How you doing?" And then someone says, "Fine" or "Good." And then you
Right.
go, "How are you doing?" But I just love the "How are you really doing?" It's
Mm,
just an invitation for truth. I wanna hear it. I don't wanna hear the good. One of the things
mhm,
that I think COVID has done for us, um, one of the silver linings, one of the few silver linings, or many silver linings, is I think it's humanized emotion, and I think everyone through the last 2.5 years has struggled at some point, and I think it's done us favors from a mental health and mental fitness perspective.
mhm.
It's now part of the conversation of how are you really doing, which I think is
Yeah.
valuable.
So much more being aware. The reminds me when I was at Sandy Hook every week, the only thing I would ask is how's today? That's it.
Mm,
That was my
oh, that's
favorite
good.
line there.
Yeah,
It is every day is different, but if you focus on one day, it kind of like goes to your line, how are you really doing? Like those
yeah,
are just great questions that open the door for people to share if they want, right?
That's really good.
Yeah.
How's today? That's so good. Here is a question. It is from LinkedIn user, so I know Ale will let us know who this is, or if you are out there, let us know who you are. Are you familiar with the 5 love languages? If so, is there a correlation between them and perceptions of care? So for those who are unfamiliar with, do you know the love languages, Jen?
Oh yeah, no,
Yeah.
definitely.
So
I love this question.
there's acts of service, physical
Uh-huh.
touch, so hug or handshake or whatever, gifts, words of affirmation, and quality time.
Yes.
Those are the 5. So what do you think? Is there a correlation between the 5 love languages and perceptions of care?
I think so. I think it's a great question. I think it's a very intuitive and perspective question, because caring is all about wanting to do actions for somebody that you know they're going to appreciate.
Yeah.
So the more you know about the person, the better you're going to be able to do those actions for someone, and also words. But yeah, it goes very, very well with it. Thank you
Nice.
for the question.
Yeah, love that. And I'm told that that's Stan out of Brazil. So thank you, Stan, for that question. And I think most definitely. And again, I think that those 5 love languages and that assessment can help us bring that platinum rule to life. Treat others the way you wish to be treated. You
Yeah,
know, some people want words of affirmation. Some people just want you to do their laundry.
I know.
Whatever it might be. Here's another question from Rafi. How to train leadership on caring? We've spoke a little bit about this, Jen, but anything yet to share, or the bullet points on this one again?
Yeah, no, let me go through the 4 steps because it really is a process-driven training. First, we have to assess. And what we do is we assess both the behaviors and a personal assessment. So you yourself get a report back like, here's where you say you're awkward. Here's where you say you are good at something. Um, Once we have that data along with an anonymous pre-survey that really dives into how cared for do you feel? Where do you feel cared for? Where do you not feel cared for? What are you worrying most about? What have you been dealing with this last year? So it really takes a good temperature read of an organization. How cared for do you feel outside the workplace? Just as an aside, we've had groups up to 35% of people, employees don't feel cared for outside of work. So if you're not
Outside
caring
of
for
work.
them in work, all right? So first, an organization, that's our new world, Ted, as you know that. You really have to have a temperature read of how cared for and connected your workforce is going into this. Once we have that data, we'll go in with a webinar, a keynote, or a presentation to kind of take that data and wrap it around how our world has changed and why some of these things are so critical to the workforce. If you look at any data from McKinsey or Deloitte or Bain or all these organizations coming out with data on how the workforce is being transformed to make it about the whole person, make it people focused, not mission focused.
Yeah.
And how this fits into that. John Maxwell has that great line, people don't know what you care until they know that you care, right? Did I say that right? People
It's
don't care
I have it here, and it's Teddy Roosevelt says it
Is
says
it
it as
Teddy
well.
Roosevelt too, right? Yeah.
Nobody cares how much you know
What you
until they
know
know how much you care.
right. So we have to understand how that underscores everything in an organization. Then what we'll do is we'll go into workshops to equip. You will take your assessment. We'll go through and really walk you through that awkward zone as the basic, most fundamental level, making sure that when you walk out of that, you will never be stuck in that gap, that awkward zone. You will have a game plan of here's what's stopping me, here's what I can do, and here's what I can say. And then we cultivate. We have a train the trainer program that we will embed people within an organization to continue those assessments, continue to onboard people with those skills, and so on and so forth. So that's how we train.
That's great, Jen. Are those assessments publicly available? Are they on your website?
No, it's done through our training. We've not made that available to, we're mostly B2B right now with that. So that's how we're doing it.
Got it.
So at some point we will though.
Good. And if you do want to learn more about this process and about the work, I'm sure more is on your website. Am I right in saying it's inspiringcomfort.com?
Absolutely. And please follow me on Jen Marr, just as my name is underneath me here on LinkedIn. I'd love to stay in touch with all of you and answer any questions and follow the content and see what we're up to.
Awesome. So inspiringcomfort.com. Jen, in our remaining minutes here, anything else we've yet to discuss or go into that you really wanted to, or any final words from you?
Well, I have a question for you.
Oh, we don't do
So,
that. Sorry. Thanks. That's great. Thanks. We're all out of time. No, 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 no. Go for it.
so, or even for anybody that's still listening, where do you see this? Where do you see these concepts heading in the workforce? You know, after we've gone through the last 2 years, we know, like my first book was even before COVID, right? We knew there's this massive, massive disconnection going on and mental health crisis. And, you know, and what I've been studying is how critical it is for the workforce to be one of the areas that cultivates this.
Yep.
Where do you see this going in the workforce, and how long do you think it will be before this becomes standard practice?
I don't know how long it will be, but I do think it is trending in the right direction. And I think, what we've seen through the great resignation or great talent swap or great awakening, I think now more than ever, um, people and employees know that they have rights. People and employees know that they have worth. I think there's a shift. There's a shift in sort of the economics of employment that all of a sudden there's a power shift toward the employee now more than ever. I think
Mhm,
people are voting with their feet, whether it's physically or digitally. And the reason they're voting with their feet is, and we know this, people are willing to take hits and sacrifice on compensation for increased flexibility to be treated as the human being that they are and to be well led and to be in healthy cultures. And
mhm,
so I think that having care, empathy, compassion, emotional safety, psychological safety, a speak up culture, they've always been a competitive advantage, not just from a cultural perspective, but from a employee engagement perspective, from an innovation perspective. I don't
mhm.
think we can talk about psychological safety, or we can't talk about psychological, pardon me, we cannot talk about innovation without also talking about trust and psychological safety. They're inextricably
Absolutely.
linked. And so uh, I think a couple things. People are voting with their feet physically or digitally,
Mhm,
voting with their feet in favor of flexibility and healthy culture. And
mhm.
so, you know, um, I think I have some job security, but I hope that I don't. Um, and I don't think that'll be next year. But we're a fallible species, you
Right.
know. And I'm writing 3 chapters in my book right now, Jen, that I think are like the real meat.
Mm,
Leadership defined. We have to define what we mean by leader. I think there can be a societal definition, and there's room for specific definitions inside of specific organizations. What it means to be a leader in one school is different than another, different in companies. Like that's fine. Then I think we need to select leaders against that definition, and then support leaders when they're in place.
love
Um,
that.
I hear that you're doing a lot of that in the supporting leaders, which is great. Um,
Well, yeah. Well, so
yeah,
I think what we're hearing, I see this LinkedIn user question, do we think that's a top down or a bottom up change? Um, so I think what I hear you saying, and I tend to a little bit agree, it's going to be bottom up, right?
I think it's both.
Okay.
I don't. And I'm assuming that's Stan. If it isn't Stan, apologies. Um, so top down is evolution, bottom up is revolution.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So revolutions are typically more volatile, violent, sometimes quicker, and don't always create lasting, sustainable change. Sometimes it's just noise. Evolution is top down. I think we'll meet in the middle.
Interesting.
I think there will continue to be people in positions of leadership and power who have in the past and will continue to wholeheartedly embrace this people, purpose, heart-centered perspective, and it will be bottom up as well, and we'll
Mm,
meet in the middle. Um, yeah,
that's really good.
that's what I think.
That's really good. Well,
Cool. Well, this has been a joy. I knew it would be, and proof was in the LinkedIn pudding. Um, thank you, Jen, for joining us. Thank you to Alejandro behind the scenes, who's making sure all the things work as they should. And thank you all for joining us. a treat to give Jen and I an excuse to have this conversation.
know.
We would have had this
Don't forget
conversation
to
anyway.
show up.
Yes. Here's the book, as Jen shared.
All right, showing up. You can get it on Amazon too.
Nice. Lovely.
Shed, thank you so much for hosting this conversation. Can't wait to stay in touch.
Yes, we'll do it again soon.
All
Thanks
right.
all. Take care.
Bye.
Show up
Thank you.
today.